Passion. Fiery and languid. Like gravity, it's born in every movement and seeps under the skin like fire. Like in a dance. When was the last time you felt it? For a loved one? For a favorite endeavor? For life itself? As for me, a perpetually busy married woman, it's something I've quite forgotten. However, one day, I was compelled to recollect its potent force, which can be quite destructive at times. It happened through the death of my neighbor, her murder to be more precise, behind which lies a passionate and dangerous tale. It's beautiful and bitter all at once. A regular evening. I opened the door to my apartment and on my way to the kitchen, tossed my purse onto the floor. My husband Dinesh was already asleep, as my shifts as a restaurant manager often end late into the night. Peeking into the fridge for a snack, I realized I wasn't the only night owl here. The sound of music was coming from Tara's, my upstairs neighbor. It wasn't too loud, but it was loud enough for her annoying landlady, who lived above her, to knock on the radiator again. But I wasn't bothered, as I knew Tara had been carefully preparing for an international dance competition. For her, it was a chance to break into the major league, to prove to everyone that she was worth something. Since I was a little girl, I've been captivated by the way dancers can convey the full energy of their emotions through movement. But for some reason, I never dared to try dancing myself. This is how Tara and I became friends, discussing this. Occasionally, I'd treat her to curry chicken, and she'd share her ideas for acts with her new dancing partner with me. Drifting off to sleep, I could still faintly hear the sounds of tango from Tara's apartment, but I had to go back to work the next day. The morning followed the usual script: the alarm clock, coffee, kissing my husband. Rushing out of my apartment, I grabbed Tara's laptop. I had to return it because I'd borrowed it while mine was being repaired. But as I went up to her door, I ran into a police officer. "Do you know Tara Ferrozzo?" he asked. There were many people in my neighbor's apartment. There were medics, police officers, and Tara's landlady, Mrs. Boleyn. She was the one who called 911 because she'd spent all night knocking on the radiator to make Tara turn off the music. And in the morning, she found her tenant dead. Tara lay on the bed in an unnatural position. Her black hair was scattered across the pillow and starkly contrasted with her pale face. There was a handgun in her hand. Where did she get that? It had a silencer, plus the music was on. Now I see why I didn't hear the shot. Wiping away tears, I answered the detective's questions, which he seems to listen to only formally. Because did it really matter what I said after they'd found a suicide note next to the body? It read something about the hard life of an immigrant and unemployment, constant lack of money and loneliness. Could something like that have been written by someone who passionately loved every day of her life, who was so eager to achieve victory and dreamed of finally breaking free from the cycle of failure? I didn't believe a word of it. The landlady interfered. She claimed she suspected Tara was a prostitute. Where else did she get the money, she claimed, if she's home all day long and wanders around at night? Wandered. I might not be a close friend of Tara, but calling her a prostitute was a bit too much. The police officers said they would look into this, but it seemed they'd already painted a picture for themselves. A troubled woman, no signs of struggle, a locked door, an undamaged lock, and the key that had been left at home. What else could it be but suicide? But where did Tara get the gun, and especially with a silencer? Seemed that nobody cared anymore. Outraged, for the first time in my life, I decided to break the law and didn't confess to the police that the laptop I was holding was Tara's. In the evening, weeping on Dinesh's shoulder, I firmly decided to start my own investigation. I was certain my neighbor was murdered, and I had to at least try to seek justice. I always knew that my dear husband was always there for me. That was precisely why I married him. And now, without hesitation, Dinesh offered his help. The fact that the gun had a silencer puzzled him too. What for? It's a costly thing and absolutely unnecessary for suicide. I took a few days off work. I tried to guess the password to Tara's messenger with her chats, and searched her laptop for any information that might provide me with a clue. Finally, I found something odd in the history of her internet browser. There was a whole bunch of links to items in online stores. And they weren't ordinary things, but costumes from sex shops. All the purchases were made at different times, with varying frequency, but all of them were exclusively pink. Tara hated pink. She once told me she'd given away a gift from her ex, a pink bathrobe, to a bum in the street, claiming it was the best way to make that distaste do some good. "You also hate your work dress code," my husband remarked. He might be right. So I rejected the version of Tara being a prostitute. My next guess was a strip club. Among the heap of the internet addresses, I found a website of a place called Pink Flamingo. The girls in the photos were all bingo, they were all wearing pink. Well, Dinesh would be happy to help me, as there was no way I was going to such a place alone. And there we were later in the evening, waiting at the entrance. In neon letters, the sign read, "Pink Flamingo, only men allowed." The security guard's look dispelled the last of my doubts, and I knew for sure he wouldn't let me inside. After giving my husband some instructions, I stayed to wait for him around the corner. Our plan was to find someone who knew something about Tara. It was unlikely anyone would talk for free, so we had withdrawn a little money from our family credit card, from what we had been saving to buy a car. An hour later, Dinesh emerged with one of the girls. Her bold attire suggested she had just come off stage. The stripper told us that Tara had indeed worked there. However, her service included no intimacy. It was a contractual job. So when she decided to quit early, it was a violation of the contract terms. And their boss issued a huge fine to her and often sent his messenger, Barry, a stocky man with tattoos all over his body, to remind her of her debt. He looked dangerous and brazen. Could Barry have killed her? The girl wasn't sure, but she added that at some point, Tara's boyfriend had come to settle the issue of her debt. He even started a fight with Barry. But then the goon took out a gun, and what arguments can stand against a weapon? I had never heard of Tara having a boyfriend. Who was he? The stripper described him, and I recognized Dean. They were indeed close, but only as dance partners. Dean had a wife whom he loved, and whom Tara had been friends with for most of her life. The next morning, seeing my husband off to work, I ran into Mrs. Boleyn. She was coming down to see me. She informed me that once the investigation was over, she would be looking for new tenants, and if I wished, I could take Tara's belongings. Otherwise, she would have to throw them away, as Tara had no relatives. Mrs. Boleyn suggested I take the duplicate keys from Dean, as the police had taken the original key. Well, if Dean had the key to Tara's apartment, it was absolutely possible that he was really her lover. But it also meant he could be the murderer, because whoever killed my neighbor had to have the key to lock the door behind them after the murder. Or they locked it from the inside and climbed out the window of the 7th floor, but this version was too supermanish to even consider it. I found Dean at his home alone. When he heard I was carrying out my own investigation and had a witness, he confessed that passionate tango had unwittingly awakened such a passion in both of them, that neither of them had the power or the wish to stop. And thus they began to meet not only for rehearsals, they danced, they loved each other, and then they danced again. The news that Layla, Dean's wife, was expecting a baby brought them back to reality. For many years, the women had been best friends. They both enjoyed dancing and met during classes. However, the more pragmatic Layla eventually lost hope to succeed in this area, found a profitable IT job, and got married. Tara continued to pursue her dream. 6 months ago, Tara had suddenly found herself without a partner. He had suffered a complex leg fracture, and it was uncertain whether he would ever return to the dance floor. Layla suggested that Tara practice with her husband Dean, who was also a dancer. Layla's pregnancy came as a shock for both Dean and Tara. He and his wife didn't share moments of intimacy often lately, but to avoid suspicion, he couldn't completely refuse his marital duties. A classic story. Love, betrayal, and a trio. And in the end, someone had to quit. Dean decided to stay with Layla, with whom he had a long-lasting relationship, stability, and a child. And what, besides passion, could Tara give him? As a farewell, she asked her lover for just one thing, to dance with her one last time, at the international competition they had been preparing for several months. And then she promised she would disappear from his life forever. Who could say these words would become prophetic for Tara? Dean finished his confession, and it seemed for a moment he felt relieved. But when I asked about the key, he panicked. He claimed that everything I'd concocted about the murder was nonsense, that Tara killed herself because of the breakup, and that I should stop playing detective. Well, I had to figure this out. Rushing into Tara's apartment, I began searching for clues that would shed light on the triangular puzzle of others' relationships. Photos, notes, bills. After turning everything upside down, I sat at the dressing table, exhausted, and accidentally hit one of its drawers with my knee. Suddenly, a secret shelf popped open beneath it. Shocked, I didn't get at first that it was a hiding spot. Then I ran my hand inside and pulled out a thick notebook. It was a diary that Tara had had since her teenage years. It contained everything she had been through in life. Her father was a criminal who spent most of his life in jail. After her mother died from alcohol, she ended up in a foster family, where her elder stepbrother abused her until she ran away. The reading made my hair stand on end. When she reached adulthood, Tara moved here and started a new life, trying to make a career as a dancer. She wrote how hard it was at first: unemployment, struggling to get by, loneliness. The story ended abruptly. The next page was missing. After it, the story spoke of light at the end of the tunnel. Tara had found a job and was preparing for the competition, hoping to succeed. The last entry was about the pain of breaking up with Dean, but Tara was confident she would overcome everything, because recognition and a lot of work were waiting for her. So the breakup wasn't the reason behind the suicide? Unlike what Dean tried to convince me of, I'd known it. And then it dawned on me. The suicide note. It was written on the same type of sheet, torn from the same notebook. What if Tara hadn't written the suicide note, but her murderer had? They knew about the diary and simply tore out a page on which my neighbor described her hardships in a foreign country after moving. Pondering, I stared into the mirror, and suddenly I saw a message written in red lipstick, "Sonríele a tu sueño," which means "smile at your dream" in Spanish, the song they planned to perform to with Dean. Right. Where was Tara's laptop? There it was, the password I'd been unable to guess until now, but there was no chat with Dean on the messenger. I knew I had to find one tricky folder where the whole history could be stored. And bingo! The last person to text Tara was Dean. Everything turned upside down in my head. "It seems Layla found your keys and is heading to yours," Dean wrote. A series of calls followed from him, but she didn't answer. The date and time were the evening of Tara's death. I didn't have a chance to talk to Layla. I waited a few times in front of the building where she and Dean lived, but she never showed up at home. Their neighbors told me she'd packed and left her husband. So I handed over Tara's laptop and the information I had gathered to the police, and they arrested Layla a week later, having pieced together the entire chain of the tragic events. When she'd learned that her friend was in trouble because of the death, Layla withdrew the necessary sum from her own savings and went to Pink Flamingo to settle the issue. She knew that poor but proud Tara would never accept the money, which for Layla, who had a good salary, had long ceased to be a problem. But learning of Layla's intent, Tara's boss mocked her, asking if she was really ready to pay for her friend who was having an affair with her husband. Layla didn't believe it and said she would pay extra if he could prove the affair. The proof came quickly. Layla received a video from the club's security camera of Dean and Tara kissing at the back door. Pregnant and betrayed, Layla bought a gun from Tara's boss, and the next evening she found her friend at her home rehearsing, and she killed her. When he knew what his wife had done, Dean tried to cover up her tracks. He cleaned up his chat with Tara, as in some messengers, you can do this for both parties. But he overlooked just one thing. The history is stored in a separate folder on the laptop. Whose fault was it? Dean's or Tara's? Probably both of them. But the shot that paid for their short but bright passion was Layla's. And thus, the dance was interrupted. I returned to my life, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, I felt what happiness it is to have a peaceful family routine. Nevertheless, in the memory of Tara, my husband and I kept a few of her Spanish records. And now in the evenings, Tara's favorite Sonríele a tu sueño plays in our apartment. And Mrs. Boleyn irritably knocks on the radiators in response.